All right, let's dive right into this explainer. If you've been keeping up with the news lately, you know the recent monsoon parliamentary session was, well, incredibly chaotic, to put it mildly. We're talking forced adjournments, nonstop disruptions. Historians and political analysts are even calling it one of the most tumultuous sessions in recent memory. So today, we're going to use an incredibly insightful piece of source material to translate all that chaos into plain, easy-to-understand English. We'll unpack the heavy political jargon, break down the major events, and figure out exactly what went down when the House doors opened on July 20th. Our source material kicks off with an absolutely powerful metaphor. It states that Parliament is not a gladiatorial arena of victors and vanquished. Now, victors and vanquished simply means winners and losers. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the specific laws and street protests, we really need to unpack why this specific word choice is so crucial. Because honestly, it sets the stage for everything that went wrong. Look at how this ancient Roman concept completely clashes with what a parliament is actually built for. When we say gladiatorial, we are talking about intense, ruthless combat where one side literally seeks to destroy the other. The source is arguing that lawmakers walked into this session actively looking for a bitter fight to the end, completely tossing aside the idea of treating the House as a place for civil conversation and compromise. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, a House in disorder. Second, protests and police action. Third, hurried laws and federalism. Fourth, stalled bills and committees. And finally, number 5, conversation over combat. Starting off with Section 1, a House in disorder. This session begins. Let's see how things kicked off with a massive clash of expectations. To really get a feel for the mood, you have to look at day 1. The ruling party, the BJP, walked in with the confidence to turn the session into a complete theater of triumph, basically a massive political victory lap after their recent election win in West Bengal. But as our text reports, public reaction totally derailed that trajectory. Right out of the gate, on July 20th, huge student protests demanding the resignation of the Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan began to gather serious momentum. It entirely flipped the script. What was supposed to be a celebration instantly became a pressure cooker. Moving to Section 2, protests and police action, tension on the streets. This takes us straight to the physical conflicts happening right outside the Parliament doors, which, as you'll see, completely hijacked the mood inside. The source neutrally but very firmly details a harsh crackdown by Delhi police on these students. We're talking about rogue officers filmed not just committing violent assaults, but allegedly attempting to sexually abuse young protesters. And the kicker? No accountability has been fixed for this yet. In plain English, that means no official has been formally blamed or punished. This blatant lack of consequences is exactly why public opinion turned so incredibly sharp against the authorities, triggering huge, sustained criticism from both the opposition parties and the general public. And there's a striking bit of situational irony here. A government building designed literally for talking had turned into a battleground, yet the top leaders were largely nowhere to be found. Our source notes that while the government was facing this absolutely intense public and political backlash, both the Prime Minister and the Home Minister barely attended the parliamentary proceedings. The House was boiling over, but the chief executives were rarely in the room to take the heat. That brings us to Section 3, hurried laws and federalism, passing bills quickly, because inside the House, the legislative machine kept right on churning. Despite all that chaos, the process pushed forward, leading to what the text calls inadequate deliberation. That's just a formal way of saying they didn't spend nearly enough time actually discussing the long-term impacts of what they were passing. Case in point, these 3 major actions were rushed through while the government was under intense pressure. First, they legally mandated the singing of the national song at state functions. Second, they pushed through a major mining bill, despite loud opposition protests. And third, trying to calm the furious students outside, they rushed stronger laws against exam malpractices, which is simply the formal word for cheating or corruption in the testing system. Now, to understand why the opposition fought that Mines and Minerals bill so hard, we need to unpack another key political word, and that's federalism. In easy English, federalism is basically a buddy system for running a country. It's a structure where power is carefully shared and balanced between a big central national government and the smaller local state governments. It exists to make sure the central authority doesn't hold all the cards, ensuring local voices actually get a say in what happens in their own backyards. Keep that definition in mind as we look at what the source argues about the new mining law. The text states, this amendment blatantly overlooks serious concerns about undermining or weakening that very federalism. By grabbing central control over resource-rich lands, it continues a trend of expanding the central government's power. It's essentially stripping decision-making rights and resources right out of the hands of local state governments and the communities actually living on that land. Let's look at this timeline because it perfectly connects the dots of cause and effect during the session. It all starts on July 20th, with students furious over exam cheating, demanding the education minister step down. Then we see the harsh police crackdown in the following days. Mid-session, the government tries a Band-Aid fix by passing those anti-cheating laws. But ultimately, by the end of the session, the pressure works and Mr. Pradhan resigns. The anger on the streets literally forced the hand of the parliament. Section 4, stalled bills and committees, laws on hold. So while some laws were rushed through in the heat of the moment, other massive legislative attempts hit a brick wall. Before we look at what didn't pass, here's another heavy political term from our text we need to translate: delimitation. Simply put, delimitation is the incredibly complex process of redrawing the map of voting districts. It decides how many voters are in a specific area. It might just sound like boring geography, but believe me, it is highly controversial. Just by shifting an invisible line on a map a few miles left or right, you can completely alter which political party holds the voting power in a state. So the government actually tried to fast-track two major items that ultimately hit the brakes. On one side, a whole new architecture for that delimitation process we just defined, and on the other side, amendments to the FCRA. These are the strict rules regulating foreign financial contributions coming into the country. The opposition managed to firmly stall both of these, but our source throws in a major caveat. These attempts didn't entirely materialize right now, but they are very much alive and could easily be brought right back to the table. Because those bills are still technically breathing, our explainer source is very careful to point out that the opposition shouldn't get too comfortable. The text explicitly warns they shouldn't be triumphant, meaning don't celebrate like you've won a final, permanent victory. As the ruling party itself found out on day one of the session, in politics, today's massive victory can turn into tomorrow's sudden setback in the blink of an eye. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, Conversation over Combat. The path forward. With all these rushed laws, street protests, and gridlocked bills, how do we actually fix this broken system? Rather than forcing laws through or treating the House like a battlefield, the source outlines some incredibly practical steps. They suggest transparent consultations, which is just plain English for having open, clear conversations with everyone involved before you write a law. They also recommend sending that foreign funding bill to a joint parliamentary committee. Think of a joint committee as a special task force made of members from multiple different political parties. Their whole job is to put a pause on the yelling, sit in a room together, and investigate a bill line by line so it isn't just a numbers game of who has the most votes. On top of that, convene all-party meetings, circulate draft laws openly so there are zero surprises, and critically, actually ask state chief ministers for their input before redrawing voting maps. It is all about making sure every single voice is heard. And that brings us full circle right back to our opening metaphor. The absolute core argument of our source is that Parliament is designed for the collective pursuit of solutions. That means everyone, from across the political spectrum, rolling up their sleeves to solve the nation's problems together. It's supposed to be a forum for constant conversation, not ruthless political warfare where one side is just trying to completely destroy the other. So looking at everything we've unpacked today, the fierce protests, the rushed laws, the heavy political jargon, and the stalled agendas, I want to leave you with one final thought. If a system is fundamentally built for debate, for compromise, and for sharing power, what happens when it treats every single session like a war? Can Parliament finally step out of the gladiatorial arena and get back to the conversation? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep that question in the back of your mind as we watch how the next political session unfolds.